Welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast, where it's all about fixing your relationship without your husband's conscious effort so you feel desired, taken care of, and special, even if your relationship feels completely hopeless. I'm Laura Doyle, and today I'm talking about 3 ways to solve a passive-aggressive husband problem. My guest Lucy often joked that her husband was like one of her kids or one of her social work clients. She couldn't trust him to be a responsible adult or parent because before he became a stepdad to her kids, he had abused opiates and moved into his mom's basement. But Lucy worried that she was going to ruin her second marriage, so she did something completely different from anything she'd been doing before. And today, her relationship is peaceful with lots of laughter, and she feels desired. Also, she never worries about money. She's going to share her best secrets for keeping the same man, but getting a much better husband. And then I'll be giving out the worst relationship advice of the week award, which is a real heartbreaker. All of that is coming up. But first, let's talk about 3 ways to solve a passive-aggressive husband problem. What makes him so hostile, and how can you cause a miracle when you have a passive-aggressive husband? I mean, if your man says things that are subtly insulting and hurtful, but then acts like you're the one who's overreacting, it can be crazy making. At times you wonder how you can ever win when he mopes around and won't say what's wrong. If all you're getting is the silent treatment, how do you respond to that? It's frustrating and lonely to live that way. And what about when he agrees to do things that you've asked him to do, but then he doesn't do them? How do you bring up that light in the basement that's still broken, even though he's been promising to fix it for 3 weeks without causing a fight? I used to wonder myself and feel hopeless that there was anything I could do about my husband's poor behavior. But now I have a go-to that changes everything for the better. This is what works wonders with a passive-aggressive husband. Number 1, identify your spouse fulfilling prophecy. Now, early on in my marriage, I had no idea why my husband was using all his might not to do the things he knew I thought he should do. But I was very curious. He'd say he was going to do the dishes, but never actually moved a muscle to do them. Instead, he watched hours of TV. When I asked about the dishes as politely as I could, he'd growl, "I just can't win with you." And I was thinking, sure you could if you would just do what you said you were going to do instead of yelling at me. I came across the term passive aggressive somewhere, and it totally fit my experience of him. I felt validation about identifying my husband as someone who was passive aggressive. Like, well, that explains a lot. And I even said things like, "Aren't we being passive aggressive today?" Not very charming, I know, but somehow I thought that if I pointed out what he was doing, it would make him aware and he'd be so motivated to change that he would be more considerate and tender as a result. But that never worked, not once. Even as I say that explanation, it seems like flimsy reasoning on my part. Who improves because their spouse criticizes them like that? And when I was saying that, how was I any less passive aggressive than I was accusing him of being? Still, I didn't know what else to do with my prized diagnosis. So I just kept on saying it to him like a spouse fulfilling prophecy. "You're so passive aggressive." And guess what I continued to experience? You guessed it. I noticed he was even more passive aggressive than ever. He and the TV were constant companions, and the icy silence left a chill in the air. Of course, that's what I was focused on. And what you focus on increases. I kept telling him how passive aggressive he was, so that's how he kept showing up for me. Isn't it amazing how powerful I am that way? Here's how I got myself out of that mess, thankfully. Well, number 2 is to make a new spouse-fulfilling prophecy. Once I realized how much influence I had on how my husband showed up, I started choosing my words more carefully. Instead of affirming that he was passive aggressive, I started saying things that matched the experience I wanted to have, like, "You're always doing things to make me happy." Where did I find the chutzpah to say something like that when I felt he didn't care about my happiness? After all, no amount of begging and pleading was motivating him to do housework or even to have a civil conversation with me. It was just an experiment at first. I mean, what could it hurt to change up my approach? I said it to myself and I said it to him. And not only was he less defensive when I stopped insulting him by calling him passive aggressive, he acted like I finally got him. He looked relieved and he nodded in agreement with my new spouse fulfilling prophecy. And while I may have been shaking the first few times I said it because it felt like such a stretch and I thought he might see that I was lying, my new spouse fulfilling prophecy, my SFP, had an unexpected consequence. It changed the way I saw my husband. I started to see everything he was doing to make me happy. He was taking out the trash. He was putting the trash cans on the curb every week. He was deferring to the movie or the show that I wanted to see. He was going to get the car in the rain while I stayed dry. Now I had evidence that what I was saying was actually true. Instead of feeling uncomfortable, I was feeling elated that I had more power than I realized to have the experience of my husband that I wanted to have. Eureka! All I had to do was use the right spouse fulfilling prophecy. It taught me that it's impossible not to experience what I'm focused on. Isn't that great? If I don't like what I'm experiencing, I can change my focus and have a better experience because it's impossible not to experience what I'm focused on. Yes, I'm repeating that because, wow, that's everything. So, number 3 is to say your spouse fulfilling prophecy to yourself and to him. Now, you can make your own spouse fulfilling prophecy by taking your complaint about your husband and just flipping it upside down. What is it you would have if he wasn't passive aggressive? Or you could fill in the blank with your own pain point if your husband isn't passive aggressive. What is the hidden desire in your complaint? A complaint's just a lazy desire. So, what is your desire? Is it that he's gentle and tender? Is it that he's lighthearted? Is it that he's so patient and understanding? Sometimes women struggle to come up with a spouse fulfilling prophecy because it seems so far from the truth. Now, the thing about the truth is that it's subjective. It's based on who's observing it. In physics, simply observing a situation changes that situation. And every researcher has a bias. If you start with the bias that your husband is an insensitive jerk, you'll likely experience that. If you start with the bias that he's a sweet, loving guy, you'll likely experience that. And you might be thinking that I don't get it at all because my husband wasn't really passive aggressive like yours is. And that could be. I don't know your husband. Only you know if changing your spouse fulfilling prophecy fits for you. But what if using a positive spouse fulfilling prophecy caused a miracle in your house like it did in mine? If you're willing, you can experiment and find out. If you'd like to be my guest on the Empowered Wife podcast and share about how you fixed a struggling relationship using the 6 intimacy skills, I would love to interview you. Just go to lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest to let me know that you are willing to make a big contribution to ending world divorce by telling your relationship story. I look forward to meeting you. That's lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest. My guest, Lucy, often joked that her husband was like one of her kids or one of her social work clients. She couldn't trust him to be a responsible adult or parent because before he became a stepdad to her kids, he had abused opiates and then moved into his mom's basement. But Lucy worried that she was going to ruin her second marriage. So she did something completely different from anything she'd been doing before. And today, her relationship is peaceful with lots of laughter and she feels desired. Also, she never worries about money. She's going to share her best secrets for keeping the same man but getting a completely different and much better husband. Lucy, welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast. I appreciate you being on the show.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So take us back to the bad old days. What were things like for you?
Well, I'd really like to, if it's okay, just talk a little bit about my first marriage. I really, um, I really see now that I was a common denominator in the two equations, and that wake up call really is a really big part of my journey. So, in my first marriage, I often would make kind of ultimatum type of statements. My first husband was involved in in a movement practice that brought him very close with other women, and I felt incredibly threatened by that. I would focus on that and shop for pain. I was literally digging into other women's Facebook profiles and finding every single thing he had liked and whatnot. And we had been gifted this incredible life together. We were actually literally living on someone's estate with a free place to live, getting paid amazingly well, and our kids were getting put through private school. And I managed to ruin it. And my older kids, who are teenagers now, are still kind of having that unfold for them. Like it was a pretty rough journey for them. And I always thought that was 100% my ex's fault, of course.
Yeah.
And and now I can see that the times that I was able to bring him respect and gratitude and keep my focus on where I can actually have influence, we were really thriving together. So all of that has just been huge wake up call for me. And now that I've gained some perspective on it. And as far as the bad old days of my current marriage, I would just focus on, things like, well, I would do everything. I made every appointment. I literally had his doctors telling me that he needed to be the one to call, and I would still be the one to call. And I was so focused on like whether he was smoking or not that I would I forced him to go to this hypnosis thing, and then I like freaked out on him when it didn't work amazingly. And even though he is like the most loyal person I've ever met in my life. He would never ever leave. And actually, he really wouldn't even cold warm me for that long. There were times that I would say something that felt really disrespectful to him, and he would be silent for maybe 5 minutes. And I would just be at him like, what's wrong? Like, you need to take responsibility for your feelings and tell me what's going on, kind of thing. So yeah, that was me in the bad old days.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's lonely. What I hear, and this was my experience too. Like, I just didn't have the skills. I didn't know how to get what I wanted. And so I did a lot of things that were pretty counter to creating the intimacy and the passion and the peaceful relationship that I wanted.
And there was a lot of crying. There was a lot of crying and getting rejected. I had never been in a relationship where my story that I had in the battle days was that my sex drive was way more, my ambition was way more and stuff. And those were places where he was just not going to be able to meet me. So I would just cry myself to sleep. Like I would try to initiate, and then I would get rejected, and I would just like cry myself to sleep. And he would just be like, what is it? Like, what is wrong? And I'd be like, isn't it obvious what's wrong? Like, you just rejected me. Like, and I'm not okay over here, and don't you care, kind of thing. And he was actually like, looking back at it, he was just so incredibly patient with me, actually. And he had just straight up told me, like, when you get into these times when you're he would just get so offended when I would say things that in any way seemed to question our relationship, because he would be like, I would never question our relationship. Oh. Like, he would be like, the only way I would ever, because we have 2 babies together as well as my teenagers, he's like, the only way that I would ever question our relationship is if I actually felt like I had to do so for the kids, kind of thing. And like, and he would say that to me like very sternly, like, what are you doing? Like we married each other in front of God. Like this is not an option.
Oh,
Which is actually what I believe and what I believed for my whole first marriage as well. And I fought for my first marriage until I just so wish I had had the skills, because I fought for my first marriage, like as it went down in flames, like I was fighting for it. I mean, like in my heart, I wanted it anyway. I was completely acting like very many different confusing ways. And I've definitely through your work in the podcast and everything, I've heard women come back from situations that were so much worse than what I faced in my first marriage. And I know that we could have come back. So when I first found the skills, I really had to kind of go through this period of just another round of grief about my first marriage and my family. And I actually wound up inspired by Kathy Murray's podcast episodes, like writing my first husband a letter. And it was just an email. And I basically just took responsibility for my part in it. And that I know that if I had been just more consistently respectful and appreciative, it really is that simple that we could have stayed together.
wow.
Yeah,
That's a big deal, Lucy.
it
That
really is.
takes a lot of humility, a lot of accountability, a lot of courage. How did he respond to that?
Our co-parenting relationship, honestly, Laura, has completely turned around since I sent him that email. Do you know what they did? So, okay, just on Saturday, like this Saturday, so that's just a few days ago, my current husband and my ex-husband taught my 2-year-old to ski together with my 13-year-old.
Mm.
And they actually, my current husband and my ex-husband took my teenagers to Sugarloaf together, which is like a ski resort. Yeah. And because they both love to ski, and because there's 2 teenagers, and it's a lot more fun if there's one adult per teenager, and I can't really ski. Plus I've got my hands full with 2 baby. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old. So didn't make sense for me to go on the big trip. So I was like, so that's just an example of how, and one of my teenagers has been in crisis, even just today. And I just walked out of, my ex-husband and I are just able to be such a team for him. And it feels so clean too. It feels very it just doesn't have that needless emotional turmoil to it anymore. It's really a partnership.
Wow. I'm amazed. So what it sounds like you're describing is your family is expanded really to include your ex-husband, your current husband, like the whole family is in on being a family together, which is kind of unusual, kind of like a rare thing, right? Like,
well, it's so funny because it was something I wanted so badly. We have a family member that, like, for all these graduations and stuff, they would post on Facebook a picture of the co-parents on either side with their new partners at every event. And I was always saying that to both my husband and my ex, like, I want us to be like that. Like, why can't we be like that? And trying to control us into being like that. I tried every other way of getting us to be like that, and the reason is I wouldn't be talking to my ex, like, if it wasn't for my older kids, but I want my older kids to experience that harmony, and just that they feel like my son is going to the hospital, and he said he wants us to come together and pick him up. And it's like, and I said to his dad, I'd like to be able to pick him up together since that's what he would like. And he was like, oh yeah, of course. It was just like, and I was like, I don't know if he even realizes how different that is than how he used to be with this kind of stuff.
so how would he have responded to that in the past, do you think?
Well, it's just, anytime, and to this day, if I bring any kind of control to him, he's going to push back.
Yeah.
So
if you had said, hey, we have to both go together because that's
right, because he needs us too.
Yeah. We're laughing, but really, that is, in a way, right? You're trying to be responsive to your child's needs. That's mama bear coming out, right?
Right.
Like, if you don't know the difference, if you don't know why you're getting a good response or a bad response, it can be so painful and so lonely to think, and easy to blame your ex. Like, well, he doesn't really care about our son then, because
Right.
that is that how it used to go?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it used to feel like that, and I was very like, "How could he not care?" kind of thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and just your son even expressing that desire, really, like the purity of a child's heart, right? Like, I just want my mom and dad. I want mommy and daddy. And I get it, he's a teenager. He's not maybe a little kid anymore, but he has a sense that there's a new sheriff in town, right? There's some safety
Yeah.
for him that maybe wasn't there before. Is what I
Yeah.
hear in that, even in the request.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, pretty amazing. So, okay, but so things were going not so well in your current marriage, it sounds like.
I mean, he's so tolerant and kind that they were, and we would what I used to say about, the bad old days of my current marriage was that we would spend time being blissed out, like just totally blissed out. And then we would spend time with me crying. And I didn't understand what happened. Like I didn't understand why like we would go over to the crying. Like I didn't get it. Like I seriously just didn't understand it.
It just
Uh,
seemed random.
I
Yeah.
mean, I did vaguely know it had something to do with control or being controlling. Like I vaguely knew that there was an issue with that, like that runs through this story. Like I did vaguely know that, but I didn't know. And I had even like, read other books about the topic kind of thing and tried and even made like big proclamations. Like I'm never gonna, one of the books I've read was like, make a big proclamation where you promise like never to emasculate them again kind of thing. And so I did that and he was like, yeah, right.
Good intention,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
once one and done, right? Like, okay, I announced it. So when you were crying, what was the story you were telling yourself about him and how he was contributing to this hurt?
I mean, it would just be like I would feel so rejected or so lonely because like he wasn't, I don't know, he would rather play video. It like why would he knew I was getting dressed to come to bed. I was like gonna put on something nice to wear to bed and I would walk in the room and he would be looking at his phone. Like he would just be looking at his phone. And I would just burst into tears. And like the whole possibility of having a romantic night would be gone. Like that was why.
Right. We were gonna go down this road, but now we got to go down this road, and there's no
Or it
turning
would just be
back.
like I would be trying to have a nice dinner with everybody and my teenagers. And you know how teenagers can be like they don't appreciate you or like they say something horrible, like just as you're starting to eat dinner, or they say like, well, why didn't you get this kind of thing? And I would just burst into tears.
Mm.
Like
Ah,
because I would be like, but I was, and it was all like the difference between my picture and my desire, really, but like my difference between my picture and what was actually happening, like that clash was just really, really hard for me. And I would just crash into that and it would really devastate me. And that just doesn't happen anymore. And I think it's because I realized like it's not their responsibility to like unless I've unless I say I would love us to all, like if I said something that gave them some way, I don't know, I don't expect them to take responsibility for reading my mind and knowing how I wanted dinner to go. It doesn't seem reasonable to me anymore.
well, so that's a big deal. What you just said, I
Yeah.
love this. Right? It's like this is what used to happen. I used to just burst into tears, and we'd have to spend the night that way. And now it doesn't happen. So I want to deconstruct this a little bit because someone's listening who's thinking, like, yeah, that happens here too. But how? How did you get to that? So break it down for me a little bit. So Was there a moment where you just thought, I've got to stop, or this is not working for me? Or like, how did you get to, what are the steps? Like, how did you get to where you are now?
Well, I mean, I read your I mean, I feel like the steps are that I had done a lot of work in the past and really tried to address. I knew that some of these issues were going on. And then the turning point really was when I was pregnant with our baby, who's now 4 months old. I was 7 months pregnant, and I found out that my husband had started smoking again. And not only that, he had been smoking behind my back for a while, and I hadn't known about it. And I found out by kissing him, right, and smelling it, and I was so devastated. So I just start like I can't even remember exactly what I would have been presenting like on the outside, but I was kind of floundering for like frameworks to tackle this problem with him and stuff. And I read something about boundaries, and it was like basically go through these steps about boundaries, and it wound up sounding pretty conditional to him. So we wound up having this conversation where he's like, how could you be conditional about something like this, which is like 100% my problem? And um, and I just remember sitting in that conversation and being like, part of me was sitting outside of it, like, what are you doing? Like, this is the best love that anyone could ever give you. Like, this, he is so loyal, so kind, like, so patient. He's such a good stepfather. Like, and he, so part of me was seeing it from that side. But in the moment, I was so like, I just didn't know what to do. And then I found your book actually on a love languages Facebook group because people kept recommending it on that Facebook group. And I actually, as soon as I bought it, I just started to do what it said. And it was just like something clicked for me about just how controlling I could be in general. And I think it's partly just because of how much work I had done in the past, maybe. Because like I hear your question about like that moment of sitting down at dinner and what changed. And I don't think there's a super easy answer to that other than following the skills and just seeing the skills change my marriage and being like, I wonder what it would be like if I brought these skills to my other relationships, and just starting to experiment like that, and like bringing more respect to my teenage son, and
Yeah.
just more duct tape too. Just like really, like really like what you say about basically like, is it worth it to try to be controlling right now? So that's an answer to that, is like really asking myself those questions. Like, is it worth it to step in here? And I can literally, one thing I want to share is like, I can feel a feeling in my stomach when I get controlling. Like, there's a feeling that happens in my gut. It's like there's something that engages in my gut. And then it's like I'm trying to overreach into someone else's paper. And it's actually a feeling. And it can be addictive. I think that people get addicted to it. And when I feel that feeling, I will walk out of the room. I'll do whatever I have to do to stop. Like it's like a stop sign now. Like, I'm just like, that is not a train I want to get on. Like, it never goes somewhere I want to go.
No, never.
Yeah.
I love this. So you actually have you get like a physical notification, like
Yeah.
here comes the control train you want to get on. And now you're able to recognize it. You're like, oh, that's the control train. Don't want to get on. And you're able to make a different choice.
Or quickly apologize. Like, if it's with my husband, I say I apologize for being disrespectful when, and I do say that to my kids as well. I'll just say, sorry, I overstepped there. Like, you've got this, kind of thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. And it is impressive that you could do it quick. So I want to kind of go back and just make sure we get all the gold from this story, because this is the transformation you're describing feels really elusive sometimes. Like I'm upset. I'm crying because I'm upset because my hopes and dreams have been crushed. And you're sort of like, yeah, just kind of sidestep that now. So I really
Right.
I want to hear. So what did you first start doing differently? You mentioned duct tape, but what else did you start doing differently than what you had been doing?
Well, one of the very first things I did, I was just so ready to like hand over the finances to my husband. So I know that's one of the things he wanted to talk about. But like when I said that, I was like, I can't do this anymore and I need you to do it. I still remember exactly where we were standing. And he literally grew 6 inches and he has not like shrunk again. Like he is so, and he thinks about finances like all the time. And whenever he's talking about it, and he's always crunching all these numbers constantly in his head. And whenever he's talking about it, I'm like, the best thing I ever did was hand that over to you. I'm like, I'm so glad I never have to think about that again. And like, I just like constantly repeating that to him. And that feels good. Like it's a huge weight lifted from me. So I think if you're able to like, I know that that is something that a lot of women aren't willing to do. So I'll say that I think that, it's called the surrendered wife for a reason. It's like if I like that idea. So it was like I wanted to do it. Like I want to find ways to do it. And I want to be good at surrendering. Like so I have a desire to surrender really. Like I have a desire to feel that. And I think that's just part of my like desire body or something. So I think that in that way, I really changed a lot of things pretty quickly. I started saying whatever you think a lot, and I started letting him do. I stopped making all his appointments kind of right away, and there's a lot of them that they've been. There's been some roughness there, kind of thing, and I've just
Maybe
like, there's
like
been things that you just have to let go of them happening. And then there's times when like I wanted to hand it over the taxes totally, but then I realized like I can still deliver the papers to the office. Like I don't have to be that black and white. Like I can I don't have to be that black and white. But I really went all the way over to like trying to, and I listened to every single podcast in order. I was really brainwashing myself and really trying to get it into my system, like that this way of approaching things.
yeah. Well, I'm impressed that you relinquished control of the finances because I know how much courage that takes,
Yeah.
especially coming from a woman who felt like your husband was like another child or like one of your cases that, as a social worker. Like this is kind of the opposite of that. It's feeling taken care of. So how scary was that for you to say I can't?
Yeah, it's so weird because I did look at him that way, but I also instinctively knew that you were right that if I went over to trusting him, he would step up because I could feel that he really wants to be he wants he wants to be that person in our family. Like he wants to be that. He's actually never he's 9 years younger than me. I have more experience adulting than him. There's adulting stuff, a bunch of adulting stuff that he's like never done, really, like to this day. So it is kind of sometimes it feels weird because I have so much more practice at certain aspects of adulting than him.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like he has to grow into his own version of adulting. And he'll say things to me like, all of a sudden he was like, sometimes I think about becoming a captain. Like he works as a crew member on a fishing boat, and now he's talking about like buying a boat and becoming captain. And I'm just like, oh, you'd be amazing at that. Like you would be an amazing captain. Like I would love to see that. And, so he starts to think of himself in a different way. And I got the dramatic feedback I got when I first started. Like, I wish I could get that again because it's like it has slowed down just a little bit because it was like I dove into the skills completely. And he was like, the the whole dynamic around me feeling rejected sexually like changed instantly, like instantly. And I was just like, it was amazing. And I think that he's just really a wonderful man, like too. So that's part of it too.
Well, what do you attribute that dynamic changing so quickly around feeling rejected? It sounds like you don't feel rejected at all now.
I don't. Um, he, I think that, it's just like you've said it, like the respect is really the aphrodisiac, and just it being it for him, it needs to be completely his idea. So he's never going to respond to me initiating. Like I really am best off never initiating. And just, and yet, like, I love what you have to say about like, there's so many ways to show that you're interested. But in the beginning, I wasn't even doing any of that. Like, he would show up in my home office and he would just be like sitting there, like, so what are you doing right now? And he'd just be like giggling. And I'd be like, he's trying to like interrupt my work, like to make up to me right now. And that was just very different than the way that he was like right before I read your book. And it was a very interesting, it was very, and I do think it had to do with me saying whatever you think. I think that when you talk about receptivity, I think that's so important. And so just noticing, there's times when I say no, because like I honestly don't want to eat something or something. And then I realize like he's trying to give me a gift and I find a way to receive it anyway, like even if I have to set it aside or something. But what I think the receptivity really is, that I've never heard anyone say before, is it's like receiving him. So it's like just he like that, like looking at him and receiving him. Like when listening to him and receiving him with this respect and with like this look on my face. And when he sees that look on my face, that's when he thinks that I'm really attractive. Like he really loves to see that look on my face of like, you're amazing. Which is a feeling to me. It's like, it's not as much about receiving that he wants to run and, go get me something, which he does, but it's more just receiving that he just even is who he is, and like appreciating, like, making those gratitude lists to appreciate all his good qualities, and then receiving the gifts of like, you're kind, and like feeling the kindness and like receiving that.
Beautiful. Well, you sound so graduate level surrendered to me, Lucy, because I think of those two topics, like relinquishing finances and taking an feminine approach to sex. I think of those as like graduate level, after you can reestablish some of these, like the respect and your own happiness and things like that. So it does sound like you were ready for the skills once you got them. You're just like, boom, okay, this is.
I mean, honestly, I think that if I hadn't been through what I did all of it in my first marriage. I did the whole sad saga. I was married for 12 years and I just ruined that marriage with these controlling tendencies. And when I had that talk with my current husband about his smoking, I saw I could do that exact same thing. This is exactly how it felt, and this is going to happen. Like I just saw it. Like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen again.
Like I've seen this movie.
Right
I
down
didn't
this
like the
entire
ending.
road again. Only it's just going to be like neither one of us is going to leave because we're both too stubborn, and so it's just going to be it would just not be what it can be. Like it can just be so fun and wonderful. Like, and it would just not be that.
Wow. So what is it like now?
I mean, it's definitely peaceful. He has told me his whole life story over again. Like he says, like, it's just interesting to look at it all from here, kind of thing. And he'll talk to me for hours about all this stuff that he like never exactly told me before. He'll tell me things. He just tells me random things that he wouldn't have told me before because he wouldn't have felt emotionally safe to tell me them. And it's because he knows I'm going to not say anything except something like, I'll either say something like reflective, like it sounds like you're feeling stressed about that, or like I'll be like, I hear you. And because he knows that that's all I'll say, he really, feels like he can tell me anything. So when they went to the ski resort, the dads, and since I found the skills, the big kids and I have started calling them the dads. So since the dads took the big kids to the ski resort on Valentine's Day, my husband and I knew that we needed to have another Valentine's Day. And we actually wound up having 3 different Valentine's Days. And
That's a big deal at your house.
yeah, and I said, "Oh, I want to have a Valentine's Day before you go, and I wanted to involve like a fashion show of lingerie, and I wanted to involve champagne, and I wanted to involve flowers and chocolate." And some pieces of it weren't possible that first night, and so then we did some of it the second night, and then we had a third night. and, and it was like, there's just like a lot of this available from him all of a sudden. Like if I just say, I want, and now I have changed my last name to be his last name, which I hadn't changed my name when we got married because I had just changed it back to my maiden name when we got married and I didn't feel like changing it again. But like similarly to what you did. So that was actually kind of inspired by you. I changed my name and I've told him that I would love to have a ring and a party where my daughter plays some romantic songs and just for our family. And so we're planning that. And so, no, he's definitely like, and he's all of a sudden he's fine with us having someone clean our house. So now we're having someone clean our house. So it's just like these things and I just feel this abundance, like in our sex life, in our money life, even though we actually have, and I don't even know if he smokes or not anymore.
You don't even know.
I know that he didn't smoke the entire time that they went on the trip to the ski resort. He doesn't smoke on the boat. So like where he works. And so I know that he doesn't smoke much. He knows how to stop for a few days. And so I'm like, I don't really see what the big deal is there. So like, and that used to be a huge big deal to me.
Yeah.
But like, the reason I don't worry about money is because we always have money in the bank because he would never let our checking account balance go beyond a certain level ever. Like, and he's always crunching numbers in his mind to make sure it never does. Whereas when I was running the money, I was doing a lot of wishful thinking. I was or I would just pay everybody without thinking about it. And before you know it, we were getting the overdraft and checking our balance in the grocery line and all of that super stressful stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not like we still have our burdens like to carry together, but it feels so much lighter. I also do so much less. Yeah. So like I complete like right after I found the skills, like he started taking like the 2-year-old and the baby to daycare in the morning, bringing them home in the evening, just the day before he checks in about what I need the next day to facilitate my work life. And he's like making sure I have everything I need. And, he's just, getting them all packed for daycare and stuff in ways that I would never have let him do that before. But he does great. He's like literally never made a mistake. And if he did make a mistake, the daycare would tell him, which would be like the perfect way for him to find out. So like, yeah, no, he just wants my life to be good and easy. Like I know he does. And if there's any way that it's not, it bothers him. Like that's why he thinks so much about the money. Like he wants there to be more money, like just for us to all have an easeful life and everything. Like that's like all he's concerned about.
Wow. Well, it sounds fantastic. It sounds, and I appreciate you saying, like, if he did make a mistake, the daycare would let him know. Like, it's not really your job, and to cover it.
Right.
Like, he can have life lessons instead of wife lessons on that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what's your tip for someone who's still feeling like I have to do everything? I have to make all these doctor's appointments, and I'm the more adult here because I have more experience, or but she really wants to have the passion be high, like it is at your house, and to feel so taken care of. She gets help with the house cleaning, and she feels abundant. She feels really taken care of, like you do. Where should she start? Or how should she do that? What's your best tip for her?
If you want everything to happen like exactly your way, then you can do that, but it's going to fall apart. So it's like the way out of that is to stay in touch with what you how you feel and what you want, like you say, and to really stay in touch with that moment to moment. And it's amazing if you do that and you just like a lot of times it's self care is as simple for me as just taking another moment with my baby on the couch and not feeling like I have to jump up when dinner's getting on the table or something. And amazingly, my husband and the teenagers are setting the table and, getting dinner on the table. So it like because I'm sitting on the couch and they're looking over at me, like, and then they do look over at me and then they just start to do it. Like, and I mean, it doesn't always happen that seamlessly. And I have a very stressful, very demanding full-time job and 4 children. And I do get very just this is a lot. My work is very emotionally hard, and there's emotionally hard stuff going on with my teenagers, and it is like all that is still there. It's just that I feel like I really truly have a partner in walking with that stuff who like knows how to relax with me, like knows how to help me feel better. And like that, I'm really able to enjoy that because in some ways we did always have that we could relax together at the end of the day. Like we never lost that because we're really only like 3 years in. And like I said, I did a lot of the most damage in my first marriage, but it's, it's just, yeah. So I really feel like the key though is to stay in tune with yourself because if you stay in tune with yourself, then you can just make a conscious choice about when when to get off that couch and just let other people step up a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love that. So, yeah, you're leaving the gap, spending that extra moment on the couch, and then other people can jump up and help more
Mhm.
is part of it. Yeah. And then just being really tuned into how you're feeling and what you're
Mhm.
wanting, even though you're still a busy mom with a full-time job, a really demanding job. And so, what would you say to yourself if you could go back and tell yourself what you know now? I don't know when this would happen exactly, but I'll let you pick.
Yeah, I just wish I could tell, and people that I know that are really strong, I just wish I could tell them that relationships don't have to be a ton of work. And it just makes me really sad when people like work way too hard at relationships now. Like I'm just like, oh, I wish there was some way I could tell them that it's not doesn't have to be that hard. Because that was very much my paradigm. My first marriage was like we did like the just incredible amounts of processing, incredible amounts of couples counseling, just incredible amounts of work on our marriage. Like we were really beating that horse and like it didn't save our marriage. Like that's not what saves relationships. And I wish I could, in one way I wish I could tell. And then in another way, I'm really glad I'm where I am. And I'm certainly glad I'm in this marriage.
Yeah.
Certainly. I'm not at all saying that. Like it's just that I see in my work, I work with a lot of broken families and I'm a social worker and I just I really believe in marriage and family, and I just would love to see more families succeed.
Absolutely. Sounds like you have a lot of passion for families to stay whole. And yeah, and obviously, yeah, like your life, everything is as it was meant to be because this is the way it is, right? So it's all perfect. It's all, I think of it as like my stained glass window is all the broken pieces that I kind of stuck back together in a way that was beautiful, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I hear you saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And yet it gives you even more passion to not let anybody suffer just because she's not getting the right kind of support.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, your story is really amazing, really inspiring. I think blended families have an additional challenge.
Mhm.
And so I think anybody listening who's got a blended family and thinking, how's this ever going to work? Hearing you talk about all the kids calling them the dads
Mhm.
it just sounds so cozy. It sounds so warm.
Mhm.
And so I'm impressed with all that you've accomplished.
Thanks.
Congratulations on making your home so wonderful.
Thank you.
And thanks for sharing all the details of your story with the listeners who I'm sure are also inspired.
Yeah, thank you. It was my privilege.
If you'd like to be my guest on the Empowered Wife podcast and share about how you fixed a struggling relationship using the 6 intimacy skills, I would love to interview you. Just go to lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest to let me know that you are willing to make a big contribution to ending world divorce by telling your relationship story. I look forward to meeting you. That's lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest. And now it's time for the Worst Relationship Advice of the Week award.
It's the worst relationship advice of the worst relationship advice. Yeah, it's the worst relationship advice of the worst relationship advice of the week.
And the advice I find most harebrained this week is the concept of radical candor as a helpful approach for marriage. I heard about this from one of my coach trainees who was sharing that she had been listening to a marriage podcast where the couple seemed like they had the kind of relationship she wanted. This couple laughed together and sang together and seemed like they had it all. And they used this radical candor, which is the idea that when you're unhappy about something with your partner, you just say it directly right in the moment that you realize you're unhappy. Thus, the theory is you can resolve things quickly and clear the air so they don't build up. So, first of all, a shout out to the coach trainee. You know who you are that shared this with me. It's terrific, worthy award winner for this week. And along those lines, I want to say, first of all, who hasn't tried this already? Only very wise women who already realize that this would do unspeakable damage to their intimacy haven't tried radical candor, right? I mean, the concept of using radical candor makes me shudder because it's yet another permission slip to criticize and complain and just generally be a toothache of a person. And in my ample experience of being a toothache of a person, it didn't help my marriage at all. Quite the opposite. Of course it didn't. That's not how it works. What I learned from studying about how to love and be loved in return is that sometimes when I'm unhappy about something, it's because I overdrew my energy account. And therefore, not much good can come from being candid with my husband about how he's getting on my very last nerve, because so would anybody who happened to be in my vicinity. He can't fix that for me. Only I can restore my energy by relaxing or napping. Radical candor wouldn't help much there. Other times I'd be dreadfully upset about what my husband was or wasn't doing. And it was because I already had a phobia or some malware running in my brain. And it had been there since before I met my husband. And sometimes that malware would run, and I had no idea how to shut it down for the first 7 or 8 years of my marriage. I was upset because something triggered me, and I was used to feeling upset after that. So I would just go on that unpleasant ride because I didn't know where the exit was. I didn't know where the brakes were. My husband couldn't fix that for me either. Only I could fix that. And practicing the 6 intimacy skills sure helped me with that. Radical candor sure wouldn't have helped out in that situation. And sure, there were times when my husband was exercising his right to be wrong and doing things that annoyed me. But then again, he does a lot of things right too. So many things. And harping on what he did wrong when he already felt bad, that didn't serve the connection in my marriage. It did provide short-lived relief for me to verbally barf on him in those moments. I'm not proud to say. Can you imagine having that as your goal? Your intention is to verbally barf negativity on your partner as a method of having a good marriage. Yeah, well, me neither. And apparently, it didn't serve this couple with the marriage podcast very well either. The ones who were promoting radical candor because they announced that they were getting divorced. And that is so heartbreaking. I can just imagine the humiliation and the devastation in that family. And I can't help but wonder what would have been possible for that couple if the wife had known about the 6 intimacy skills and practiced them. I mean, that's what I think about all the time is how can we get the word out far and wide and invite as many women as possible who want help with their marriages into this culture where we practice making ourselves happy and expressing desires in a way that inspires and focusing on the experience we want to have and choosing our faith instead of our fear. How can we get the message to every woman? In some ways, when I'm giving out the Worst Relationship Advice of the Week award, I think I'm still trying to go back and save my younger self who used to try things like radical candor and ended up face planting so hard, so painfully, and end up so lonely, so hopeless. All because I had the wrong recipe. That's why I'm still mad about terrible relationship advice. I guess I'm still hurt about it. And hearing about another couple crashing like that just brings it all back. She probably just didn't know. And it cost her her marriage, her family. What a tragedy. And now that I know what does work, I just want every woman to have the right recipe and the right support to change her habits and enjoy her birthright of feeling desired and taken care of and special. And for that reason, I can say with radical candor that the advice to use radical candor in your marriage is the very worst relationship advice I've heard all week. Listen and subscribe to the Empowered Wife podcast. Next week, we'll talk about 2 steps to bring back the sizzle, even if you're not feeling it. In the meantime, I hope you're having lots of fun. Today's fun fact is that the Empowered Wife podcast has been downloaded over 500,000 times. Thank you for listening and for sharing it with the women you know. I'm so grateful for your passion and your company on this journey of creating a playful, passionate relationship.